to the Truth and Data podcast, where each week we tackle a different digital forensics topic. I'm Jessica,
I'm Sarah.
and today we're going to be talking about IoT forensics. You might notice Debbie and Kim aren't here. They are at other events doing other cool things for Exordia, teaching classes and meeting with other folks in the field. But I'm so excited to have Sarah with us as a guest today. Because I've been lucky enough to work with Sarah on quite a few IoT projects. And she's done some really, really cool research on IoT. And I think it's an important fact just to get people thinking more about Internet of Things forensics and how it could play into your investigations. We could start just by looking at the exponential growth. So I pulled the stats from an article in September 2024, which we'll include, of course, in the show notes. And it said 1.8 billion devices was the projected total by the end of 2024. And that's going to grow exponentially. What were they saying for Sarah for like 2030? Like
Like 40 billion.
40 billion devices
Yeah.
5 years from now. So the growth has just been exponential. Um, and what that means for us is just so much more data. I've been having fun messing with IoT forensics for a while. Back in, I think, 2016 or 2017, Brian Moran and I did some really cool research on the Alexa when it first came out, right? The Amazon Echo Alexa, um, and presented that. We did an Alexa, Are You Skynet talk. And it's just funny thinking back on it because it was one of the earlier talks in IoT. I mean, IoT, the phrase, has been around since uh, Sarah Parker and the presented it in Congress in 1986, referred to this concept of all these connected devices being part of IoT. But they are being used in cases, absolutely. But I don't know if everything is being used in cases, if that makes
It's
sense.
it's hard to use them all in cases too. It's just because of the encryption on some of them. And then just
Well,
knowing
that's
like
true.
just
But
knowing what to take and like what not to take from a scene is the big thing.
right. So I think a lot of what we're seeing in terms of what gets used is I know a case I was contacted on way back in the day was involved a Fitbit. It was a murder in Wisconsin. Nicole Vanderheiden was murdered,
Mhm.
and the original accused was her partner who she lived with, and he had been accused, and his alibi actually wound up being his Fitbit because he had gotten up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. And the police department did a great job in making him take some steps and measuring to see what the stride length was in the steps to make sure it was an accurate count. And it wound up corroborating his alibi of when he said he went to the bathroom in the middle of the night, um, which is
Nice.
really which is really cool if you think about it, because you can't use a Fitbit to say you were sleeping, but
Right.
you can use it if there was activity. So had he not gotten up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, it might not have exonerated him. And that's a really interesting case because the person who was convicted, George Birch, he actually wound up going all the way up to a Wisconsin Supreme Court decision on his case, and he's still serving time for that murder. But it's just interesting sometimes how these devices can be used not only to show that someone did do something, but also to exonerate someone by putting them at the scene.
So
And
that kind of makes me think like, should I wear my smartwatch to bed every night? Because I don't.
when would you charge it? No, but you sleep with your Aura ring, right?
I do. I have, two of them that I wear intermittently depending on which fit I want to go with or which device I'm testing things with. But my smartwatch, I mean, really, like it probably only needs to be charged every 2 days or so. So I really could wear it to bed. But the Aura Ring, I think, yeah, I think it would give enough data anyway.
So, for folks who are listening, Sarah actually just recently presented her Aura Ring research, which you've been doing for the last 2 years you've been working on the Aura, right? Because I know you worked on a couple different generations.
Yeah, so it was probably June, I think, of 2023 was when I started working on it, May or June. And
And
I started off with the original, and then I've recently upgraded to the 4. Not the
so
original, sorry, the 3,
the three,
because the originals are a lot bigger, but the
and
3 than the 4.
I was fortunate enough to get to hear your presentation on the data from the Aura Ring um, at B-Sides Rock, and we'll put the link to that talk there. It was actually really, really cool. Do you want to share kind of what kind? Maybe we should talk about what kind of evidence we can get off some of these different devices, and then we can start. Maybe we'll go into what to collect on scene and how people can determine that.
Yeah, so Aura Ring, if investigators want to know if there's an Oura ring, say in the building, and wherever they're searching or whether they have a search warrant for, it's a Bluetooth low energy. So you can use tools like Wireshark, NRF sniffer to try to determine like where that Bluetooth device is. You'll see come up with Aura. So you know there may be an Aura ring that's there that you may want to collect, or at least know that it's there and you can get a warrant for the data. With the data that you get, you can get sleep, you can get
Can I pause you
activities.
right there? Because I think you brought up
Yeah.
a good point, right? So just so people who haven't explored IoT, when we're looking at IoT, right, we've got the physical IoT device, which we
Hmm.
may or may not be able to get data out of. We've
Yeah.
got the mobile phone that's associated with the device, which
Yeah.
may have data related to the application. And we have, and I know you and I were testing Nest and all kinds of things recently. Um, then additionally, you may have data in the cloud, and that might
Hmm.
be something. And then for each one of these, you have different ways you could get that data, right?
Right. Yeah.
So just so people are thinking of that. So when you're talking about the Aura Ring right now, you said the first thing you talked about was like sniffing for it.
Yeah.
So the Aura Ring's Bluetooth Low Energy, what are like there's other protocols though that we need to be aware of because not everything's BLE.
Right. So there's Z-Wave, there's Zigbee. Um, those are the other two that come to off the top of my head, but those are just two other that are available on a lot. Like some light bulbs, if you're looking for if somebody turned on a smart light, maybe they even have it set up for automation, but you can get the data from the smart light. So you may need like a Z-Wave or a Zigbee to be able to get that information out of there.
So when you're talking about getting that data, you're talking about like live reading and sniffing the data
Yeah,
coming
live
in.
reading and stuffing. Yeah.
I know it's something. So so Sarah and I guess let's step back for the Aura Rig. Let's talk about like so Sarah actually started interning with me back in 4 years ago now.
2021.
Yeah,
Yeah.
4 years ago now. Before she works at Hexordia, she works on our IoT research team now. But when we first started working together, when you were interning, we did some research on the Facebook portal, and I think you kind of got
Yeah.
hooked on IoT research, and we did
I
that
did.
with Nicole Odom. Who Nicole
Yeah.
Odom's fantastic, another person who's done a lot of research in the IoT space. She actually did a really good paper in 2019 on wearables, and we'll link to that as well. Um, so we've got all of these sources of data, and
Hmm.
sometimes we can look at the physical device, we can look at the cloud, or we can look at the app. When we look at the app, we've got to look at it in Android and iOS. So my
Yeah.
first question, really, really basic question, do you always need the physical device?
No. No. So sometimes it's easier to have it, depending on which type of device it is, because you can do things like a chip off methodology to be able to get it. But if it's encrypted, you're not gonna get a lot of data there anyway.
Are you
So
finding all IoT devices are encrypted now? Are you finding some? What do you see in I
no, Google's encrypted. That's definitely one that we're seeing that is
all the Google
difficult.
products?
Yeah, all the Google products. We're not able to get anything like we can get some of the system partition information, but we're not allowed to. We don't have access to the user data partition. That's the one that seems to be really locked down.
What's
That we
encrypted?
are. we're still trying to figure out the Lux encryption on those to be able to get the user data off of that. Some of it is just not a lot of user data is available. That's it. It may be just the way that it's stored on the
Small
device.
small devices, low power,
Right.
not a lot of data storage on somebody. Some of them there are, right? Like it
Right.
depends what you're talking about. But so when we're talking about getting data off the devices, you also have things like the Aura Ring. Are you going to physically get to the chip on the Aura Ring?
No, because even if you did, I'm not. We don't know anything about them yet because
But it's
I think
titanium.
there's a few wild ones out there that have broke that people can actually see and get into. But as far as getting the data off of them, I don't think we have a methodology for that yet because of they're so small. And be able to figure out how to get some of that data off of there. So when we're looking at the Aura Ring,
Well, and the chips are
we
encased, right? The
they're
ring's
encased in
titanium, and then
epoxy,
there's
yeah,
epoxy, and there's a lot of
and
layers to get through.
titanium and a whole lot of elements to get
So
through.
even the
And anyone
Facebook
that's tried to
portal,
chip them off,
I
we just break them.
dremeled it. Well, the Facebook portal had so much
Oh yeah,
plastic
yeah,
epoxy over the
yep,
chips that I had to Dremel it away. So some of these devices are really easy. I can pop apart
yeah,
an Alexa, right, an Echo. I can pop apart some devices and get data physically off, but some devices you're not going to, and some devices it just might be weird to. But some devices you can communicate with. Brian Moran and I did some work on the Pelotons, and
yeah,
we communicated to those directly across the ADB bridge because it was just using regular
yeah,
Android, right? And some of the Samsung devices are either using Tizen or the Samsung debugging bridge, so you can
yeah,
communicate directly to those devices, which is
right.
cool. Yeah, so I'll go back to how do you determine if you should take it off scene or if you should just go for the cloud data or if you should just use the phone.
So you can research a little bit on the device. Like we are currently working on a contract with OSU where we have some extraction methodology documents out there. We're working on the analysis documents to get them out to, law enforcement so
Okay.
that they know whether or not they should take those devices off scene.
I'll give a little explanation of that project. So we have a Department of Justice US funded project that we've been working on. VTO, who did a lot in the IoT space before they retired from the project, they had done some work on this, and we picked up that contract about a year ago.
A year and a half.
Yeah. And what that was assessing 40 different IoT devices to answer exactly this question. Should they be seized or do they not need to be seized? And you would rely instead on other sources such as cloud or mobile, because can we even get the data off of the devices? Is that data encrypted? Is it data of value? Because as you were saying, not everything's of value. So
Right.
if folks are US law enforcement, um, I'll put a link to register for the OSU portal, and you can get access to those acquisition documents, the test images, and the analysis documents will be all posted there by the end of that contract in September. And part of that, we're also doing free law enforcement training. So I'll also share a link again because it's a DOJ project. This is for US law enforcement only. But I'll give a link to pre register for the on demand course for the summer. That'll 4 days of like learning about how to do analysis on IoT devices. Sorry to interrupt. You mentioned the
You're
project, so I
fine.
just wanted to clarify what
Yeah.
it was, and I'll put all the links in.
So yeah,
Um,
so it really depends on your department protocol if you should seize the device. Like maybe you have something, a scope of, SOP in place that you take
and a warrant.
everything.
And what's on your
Yeah,
warrant?
right. It's on your warrant, you take it. Because then you can validate serial numbers. So you may want to take them, even if you can't get some data off of them, because if you find some of the data in the mobile device, and that way you can correlate it back and say, yes,
Just
this
to
is the
confirm
device
it.
that they were working with. So not always a value to get the data directly from the device, but maybe some of the
Well,
correlation
I'll tell
stuff.
you, even on devices that don't store much that I've done working on, I've been able to get the account information. So if you're seeing you don't have access to the mobile device and you
Hmm.
you don't yet know what the accounts are, this might
Right.
be just your first opportunity of a device to access that could be having information at the
Yeah, because
scene.
some devices you plug right into USB
Right,
and you may be
which
able
is
to see some information.
right. And again, some of these things are running Android, some are
Right.
running software development kits from Samsung that you can
Yeah.
just download the data. Some, like you said, we're going to communicate across a wire and we can see what they're beaconing out. But I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing is that everything is different. All right, so I know we've kind of spoken about some wearables, right? And
Hmm.
we've spoken about some home speakers and some exercise equipment. What other kinds of IoT might be useful in the case?
You're probably going to start seeing a lot more AI, like robots, things that want to help you around the house. You'll probably see some of those. Some of the kids' toys, you're going to see a little bit more that are AI, that are Bluetooth, that are IoT devices.
Well, the kids' toys are
Um,
fascinating because,
yeah,
so let's be honest, there's a lot of vulnerabilities in a lot of these, and there's been a couple of instances where these toys are being hacked. But this
yeah,
also, a lot of these toys have camera recording features, and there have
yeah,
been reports about folks speaking to these, toys and like terrorizing small children. It's beautiful,
yeah,
lovely how people think. There are both there's multiple sides to that though, right? Because we can be investigating something where we're talking about, like I just mentioned, a Fitbit in the
hmm,
Nicole Vanderheiden murder, where we're looking for elements of a crime. But IoT devices, I mean, look at the big Mariah botnet, right? IoT devices can also be just actual victims where they are just being used to support
yeah,
botnets, especially when we're talking about, 40 billion of them in the next five
right,
years being active. It's not just did it get your heart rate and did it get your, like you were talking about the aura ring, your sleep pattern, your heart rate, you're
yeah,
looking at your oxygen levels. It could be, um, was it part of a larger function? Was somebody stealing footage from inside your house, from a camera inside your house? I'm a cameras on the outside of the house girl only. Personally, we have several cameras, but not internally, unless I'm testing IoT devices.
we
Um,
don't want to talk about my house. We have way
well,
too many.
yeah, but also you've got everything you test too. Do you want
Yeah,
to talk maybe
I
about
do.
some of the recent things you've been testing other than the Aura Ring? I know you've got that whole listing
Yeah,
out there.
so we've also tested drones. We've got some data from drones. We have the MetaQuest, the
What's the
Oculus
MetaQuest?
MetaQuest. It's the VR headset.
Yeah.
So we've got some of that data. But yeah, I mean,
Well,
some of the
that's
stuff
kind of
is not
interesting.
encrypted, but
If you
figuring out how to get the data off of there.
so the Oculus, that brings up an interesting thing because now you could have um, things that are happening. Like we look at crimes that happen in video games, a lot of that
Hmm.
around grooming children, etc., as an industry. But now we're talking about people could be having interactions between different virtual characters, but that they're acting out. So that might lead to all kinds of new ways of violating people's rights and their being um, in a virtual world. Were you able to get data off the MetaQuest?
We have some data from MetaQuest. We have some decent data that we've been able to look at and see. A lot of it's come from, the cloud or the associated apps with it, but some of the stuff directly off the device, we're seeing some data. Yeah,
See, that's so cool, right? Because
yeah,
Patrick Beaver did some research, I know, also on the Oculus headset, so I'll add that to the show notes. There's been a lot of research on a lot of different IoT devices, but they definitely present, I think, a couple of different issues. Um, I'm concerned about interactivity in recipes, right? Devices that are controlling other devices. So you can
yeah,
make complex, without needing to code, you can very easily set up
yeah,
recipes or functions that involve multiple things. So, you can have a wake up routine or a make dinner routine. And then, I think about coming from my world, having worked improvised explosive devices, I think about the fact that there are, IoT crock pots and in pressure
Hmm.
cookers, and
Yeah.
how these things could be used nefariously. There's so many different opportunities now for people, even who are low code or no code, to be able
Yeah.
to programmatically do things with these devices that could be an issue.
Well, there's a lot of app sharing too, like family app sharing.
Mm,
So say, my sister, she had a home automation and she wanted to share the app with me and the access. If my phone happened to be compromised, her information and things that happen at her house could be compromised just based on something from the app sharing. So that's something I think people really should probably think about too, because that leaves, families more vulnerable as well, because you never know what's happening on somebody else's device.
yeah, that's 100% also true when you're talking about sharing those things. And a lot of times, IoT devices are shared between multiple people.
Hmm.
So you might be sharing your external cameras with the other members of your house, and you might have home
Right.
automation because they're often shared devices when we're talking residential appliances.
Yeah.
But then we have IoT devices in the workplace. Oh, um, I remember you did maybe back in September, didn't you do a whole thing on the if the JFK assassination uh
Yeah. Happened today.
happened today? Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what tell them what I'm not telling them about the conference you were at and what it was and who you were doing that with and
Yeah. So I was invited to talk at a conference out in Vegas. And a few of people in the field, we were selected for a panel, and we talked about what happened if JFK assassination happened today, like what types of data, IoT data, would we see, and would we collect from all of the scenes, because there's so many. That what would we do and how would we do it? So we talked about, building security. We talked about the cameras. We talked about so many smartphones, like pretty much everybody that was there, like you're taking smartphones, but you're
you
also
got
going
to
to look
take the
for
phone.
cameras. You're going to look for people that have cameras on the outside of their house. Any type of maybe drones. Drones are huge again, especially something like that, even if they're, hundreds of feet away, but they can zoom in and pick up on data pretty quickly. So we're going to take those. There was just so much because there were so many different places that, Lee Harvey Oswald went to and touched, and things at the theater. So what type of data are we going to see there? How many people are we going to get? We're going to take all their cell phones too, the cameras, any other speakers that they may have set up, even if it's just, a normal employee listening to music on Alexa. I mean, you're going to take those because you never know what it picked up.
Also, you got badge readers, you've got
Yeah,
electronic doorbells, you've got like there's so many
so
different
many.
things that can be in the interface. What about like larger electronics? I know that at one point, I I I test as much IoT as I can. I did at one point buy an IoT connected refrigerator. I returned it because it didn't actually fit in my house, but I had it long enough to ADB it. And it's actually was pretty interesting because there was a fair bit of information that you could get for that same reason that a lot of times a refrigerator or other devices that are shared between members of a household may
Hmm.
intentionally have things like shared calendars of everyone who's
Yeah,
there. Or you might be sharing something like Life 360 data with it so you can see
yeah.
when people are coming home and going and monitoring even children, right? People are putting smartwatches on their kids so they can communicate with
Hmm.
their kids and other things. It becomes pretty prolific. All right, so let's say you want to learn how to get data. Let's talk. We'll talk physical hardware first, and then we'll go sniffing, network, then we'll go device, and then we'll kind of talk about cloud. What what skills would you suggest people get for getting data off of physical devices?
So I was fortunate enough to be able to take training with iPad Rehab and Jessa Jones and her team,
Oh, Jess is
to
fantastic.
do, yeah, to do some data extraction. And of course, I like ran right out and bought a hot workstation so I can do chip offs. But that was a fantastic training, just learning about how the devices work, learning how to read a board, using multimeters to be able to figure out where maybe your like TX pin or RX pin for UART and JTAG are.
So we'll just slow down a second for people who maybe that's
Yeah.
unfamiliar with. So TX and RX, we're talking about transmission and receive lines. UART and JTAG, those are two different protocols that are used on boards for interconnectivity. JTAG, for example, is actually meant for testing boards. So sometimes the traces are cut and it's disabled after production, but oftentimes you can use that to connect. And I'm sorry, I just,
No, you're
as we're
fine.
using
Yeah.
terms, I just want to make sure everyone knows them.
Yeah, so having that training and then really I did a lot of research on like how to even start to do a UART, start acquiring some small equipment. Nothing, of high dollar value because if it didn't, if I wasn't able to get it, I didn't want to waste a whole lot of money. But when you look at it, just it doesn't even take a lot to get what you need. Just a couple pieces here and there, and then Google research what you may need to be able to connect and look at it and test it. And if there is documents already out there, use them, utilize them. If there's not, share them if you figure it out. The community is really big. Just share. Just if you figure out how something works and you don't see any documentation or write-ups about it, just share it with the community. That's just my one plug that I gotta.
I would say from the forensic side, if you're looking for academic papers that are talking about access to devices, I would actually
Mm,
start my search on Google Scholar because a
yeah,
lot of the IoT devices have academic write-ups. Not all of them. There's so many that they
so
definitely don't
many.
all do.
Yeah,
But I would actually check Google Scholar because you're likely to see pinouts before you start going to something like This Week in Forensics, which normally would be my like go-to to start. But for
yeah.
IoT, I tend to start at Google Scholar before going. Obviously, if you are U.S. law enforcement, please sign up for the portal because that's at least 40 different devices that you're going to get instructions on how to tear down. But I think that's or at least what methods you should use. But that's it, right? You still need to learn those methodologies. A document isn't going to teach you how to do a chip off, how to do an
Yeah.
EMMC, read an EMMC and using in system programming or ISP. But once you learn those things, you can actually use a donor device to figure out devices you've never seen before. And that's the important thing because IoT is constantly evolving. All right, so that's the physical hardware. Now, like
Mhm.
physically removing chips. What about for communicating? And we talked already about like sniffing to both identify but also read network traffic.
Yeah, so for that, I use Wireshark. So learning how to do that, there's some great tutorials online for
For
Wireshark
sure.
on how to Bluetooth sniff. We got into using more of like an NRF sniffer because you can use those actually on your mobile device, but you can also use those on a computer. For law enforcement or general research, I probably recommend using a computer only because you can save the logs.
So
Where on your mobile device you can't.
So important there for folks who are thinking about it. Wireshark's a free tool,
Hmm.
but the sniffers are actually really affordable. I mean, I know we buy
Yeah,
we buy them quite a lot, and they're like around
yeah, I have
40.
one. It's
There's
like
one right
five.
there. Yeah,
It's like $5.
it's like they're like $5. They're
Yeah,
super inexpensive, and there are
yeah,
different sniffers work for different technologies, right? So the
right.
difference between if you're using Bluetooth Low Energy or Zigbee or Z Wave, I have a bin
Yeah,
full of sniffers that I use
yeah. I have a few more on
as
here
well,
somewhere, but
right? we all have, we all have bags of sniffers around here.
yeah. But
But
yeah,
you
just
know,
learning what your device needs. Research your device first. Figure out
all right. So let's talk
what
about
type
that.
of Bluetooth if you want to do. If you want to go that route,
How would you even go
figure out
about
what it.
figuring out what your device uses, right? So now there's no forensics work. Like, where do you go? I go to the FCC. I usually look up the FCC listings if it's an American design device and has an FCC
Yeah,
filing.
sometimes honestly, the box will say
The box will say if you have the box, but you can always pull that
right,
up, right? A lot of times you can
right.
just go to Amazon and read the
Yeah.
information about it.
Yeah, a lot of them, like the light bulbs, the smart plugs that are available
Yes.
now, they all say it on the box for the most part that
Well,
I've
because they want to
seen.
say what they're compatible with.
Right. because it makes it easier for the user to determine, like if they want home automation, they need to figure out which one they need to go with, set it up and which way it works with. So, but
Now,
yeah, just look at the box for the most part. Go to Amazon, go to their product page
yeah.
and see what it says.
So the mobile devices, I actually think is probably the most the one, not necessarily the simplest, but the thing that we know the most, because we're always looking at third party unsupported
Hmm.
apps, and you're just treating
Right.
that the same. And I know you and I are regularly testing different ones and sharing data back and forth on those.
Yeah. So for those, I actually recommend getting a device like a Google Pixel that you can unlock the bootloader and actually root the device, because that way when you are working and you're testing with these devices, so you understand like where the data is sitting, you actually have that full root access so that you can actually look at all of that. And the same thing for iOS devices. If you can get a phone that can be jailbroken, I recommend those so that you can get a full picture.
Absolutely. You need to get the full file system to be able to. And the big thing is you're going to have to test on an external device. You can't make
Yeah.
assumptions about the data you find in the
Mhm.
case, on the phone in the case. You might be able to identify what device it was, but you really need to go out and test it. And so I feel like that's the standard stuff that we and other people teach in mobile device forensics courses, how to parse unsupported apps and understanding data structures and all that.
Mhm.
Now you get to the cloud side, right? So
Yeah.
that's a couple of different options. It could be listening and watching the APIs, and you might even find that while you're sniffing so that you can
Yeah.
reach out and pull data back from APIs. It might be doing self archives, right?
Yeah.
Like requesting your own data. It might
Yeah.
be, well, in the instance, if you have law enforcement authorities, you may be obtaining data via a warrant directly from the provider. Um, but it also could be doing token-based extractions. A lot of times those tokens for that cloud data may be stored on the phone if that's legal in your jurisdiction. That's a whole nother can of worms about what you may be able to do and not be able to do. So we'll
Yeah, going back to Google products, the only way I've been able to get some of the data, not a lot of the data, is using their APIs.
Oh, there you go. Right. So you got to
Yeah,
use their APIs to get request the data one
yeah,
piece by piece by piece. But that's
small
good
piece
because
at a
you're
time.
one artifact at a time. This is
Yeah,
make the call, request it back. But then you script it,
yeah,
and then you've got something to use from then on. So it's
yeah,
really,
definitely.
but it's just figuring it out the first time, figuring out what the
Yeah,
calls are, and knowing that they change. That's
yes.
probably the other thing is there's so many IoT devices they can change. But I think, the biggest thing is I don't know if people are even contemplating them as much as they should in their investigations. But in that same balance, you also don't want too much noise, right? So you've kind of got to balance. For me, if I have the phone extraction, I might start the phone extraction, see if there's usage of those types of devices in a period of question, and then consider it.
Hmm.
But you're right, it might be what's on and live at the time. All right, so
Yeah, and
what's
it's
our
hard
biggest
with,
challenge?
the biggest challenge of, sorry, I like
Yeah,
jumped right
please
ahead of you there.
go for it. Yeah, it was exactly what I was asking you anyway. Like, I think we were both just coming to the same thing. So what's the big
Yeah.
challenge with IoT?
The biggest challenge with IoT is once you unplug it, you may lose some data. You may lose quite a bit of data
Ah,
because, with mobile devices, we can, plug them in and keep them in the state that we found them. But IoT devices, you can't. I mean, you can, if they're unplugged, but if they're on, you can't leave them in that state and seize them.
so you
It's
may
not an
have to
option.
do acquisition on scene. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
you,
I mean,
you
sometimes you might just because they're too large or cumbersome to
right,
move.
like the refrigerators or some of the smart stoves, things like that too.
Right.
But
But yeah, so you're talking about the potential of needing to be able to figure out, test, return to a scene, and then extract data if you don't have
yeah,
things like those documents. Very cool. Well, I hope people found this interesting, just a little bit of art of the possible. If you're interested in any of those access, we'll put a whole bunch of articles about some of the different IoT research that we've spoken about, everything from the Alexa to the Aura Ring to smartwatches. We'll put a bunch of that in the chat, not in the chat, in the show notes.
description.
description, what have you. Along with, we'll put the link for folks who are US law enforcement to go ahead and pre-register for the on-demand course this summer. And then from there they'd get access to those portal artifacts as well. And if folks who aren't law enforcement are interested in IoT, I mean, there are folks out there who teach IoT. We teach IoT. There are other vendors who teach IoT forensics, just not underneath that same project. Like our class that we teach for non-law enforcement is very different, not in the content, and that we had to develop an entire new course for
Man,
answering this question: do you seize it on scene or not?
yeah,
Which is the focus of the class for OSU, which is a different course than the one we teach. But definitely, if people are interested in learning how to extract data, not only the class from iPad Rehab, Teal Technologies also has some
yeah.
classes. I've taken their courses in the past. I can't say enough good things about learning hardware. I used to be an IPC certified instructor trainer in like 7711, 7721 rework. That's you know change and modifications board, repair and modifications of circuit boards. I do not still hold that certification. I'm not doing that work every day anymore. But there is, I guess what I'm saying is, lots of training to learn how to communicate with these devices, and there's so much research. So if there's people who are listening who are young out there getting started and are looking for research projects to both gain your experience and demonstrate your knowledge and give back to the community, I'd say IoT is another great place in addition to the millions of apps that aren't looked at, just
I
because
highly
there's so
recommend. That's where
much.
I started.
that is
So,
that is where you started, Sarah, and now you do all kinds of things. You do casework and you do research, and we're so happy to still get to have you as part of the team here. So thank you, and thank you for spending some time with us
yeah, thanks for
talking about
having
this
me.
topic. And thanks. If anyone has any thoughts or ideas about other great resources for learning IoT forensics or other great papers, be sure to share them um, in the chat, in the comments. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye,
Yeah,
all.
thank you.